Dragon Ball Game Project Age 1000. Is it Dragon Ball Xenoverse 3, or is it something even more than just that? A few days ago at the Dragon Ball Genki Damatsuri event, we ended up getting the confirmation of a brand new game, which is codenamed Dragon Ball Game Project Age 1000. Now, a lot of people are saying that this game is Dragon Ball Xenoverse 3. And I'm actually very inclined to agree for actually a few reasons. One of which is the fact that Masayuki Hirano is at the helm of the game. And if you guys don't know, he was the main producer for both Dragon Ball Xenoverse 1 and Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2. He's no longer the producer for Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2. There's been, I think, 2 other producers since he left that game, but it doesn't mean that he can't work on a sequel to that series. Also, it seems as if Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2 is finally wrapping up when the latest DLC will drop, which should complete that story. However, with him at the helm, I am very inclined to agree that it's Dragon Ball Xenoverse 3. But the real question is, what exactly could they do in terms of continuing the Xenoverse story? When it came down to Xenoverse 1, we were at Toki City. We got kind of introduced to the whole concept of the Time Patrol and maintaining history. And then they kind of continued that theme to Kanton City in Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2. But in Xenoverse 3, I think it's probably going to come to a conclusion with all of that, and I'll explain why. The code name of the game kind of is a major giveaway as to what it could be following. If you guys don't know, Dragon Ball Online happens specifically at Age 1000. And also note that Dragon Ball Online was an official thing that was published by Bandai. Unfortunately, it wasn't worldwide. I believe it was in China and Korea, but it was officially published by Bandai. So that's how we got a lot of the characters from Dragon Ball Online over to the Xenoverse series. So it would make sense that if there's a way to flow Xenoverse back into like the storyline of Dragon Ball Online, it would make sense, right? For example, right now we know that Fu is running rampant. He's doing experiments and trying to, actually we don't even know what his end goal really is, but he's running experiments and messing up a whole bunch of stuff. However, we can still tie that with Dragon Ball Online with, for example, the Time Patrol, because Time Patroller Trunks is in that game. However, there will be some changes here and there, right? If I were to guess, for example, in Dragon Ball Online, we had the Lord of Time. It was a disembodied voice, but we have a specific character that fits that role now, which is the Supreme Kai of Time. So they can make a change like that. And also, the main villain of Dragon Ball Online was Mira, but Mira is dead. And not only that, Toa is also in that game, and Fu is also in that game, but Toa is also dead. And Fu, if I recall correctly, was a baby in Dragon Ball Online, but he's a grown adult now in Xenoverse. So they can make some changes here and there, right? Where instead of it being Mira and Toa, running amok mainly Mira, it can just be Fu, right? But apart from that though, there are still other ways to tie in the Xenoverse series with Dragon Ball Online. Main thing being that we've already seen, in a sense, right? But the teaser for Dragon Ball Age 1000, Capsule Corp is also playing a big role in that game, very clearly, because the new scene that we saw is fighting against training or some sort of training simulation in there, which is a concurrent theme with Dragon Ball Heroes specifically, the whole aspect of being able to virtually go into the game and do stuff like that. But also, they could also tie something like that with, I guess, training in Xenoverse 2. We don't really see the characters virtually going into a simulation, but they vanish away, then suddenly you're in a battlefield against an enemy of your choosing. So they can try to tie that together. But also, in Dragon Ball Online, there is a robot companion that you fight, that will assist you, I should say. Kind of like Giru in a sense, named Hope, right? Which was obviously made through the Capsule Corporation. So there are ties with Dragon Ball Online and it potentially flowing into a Xenoverse 3, right? But I think one cool thing is the fact that we're supposed to be getting more original characters, a lot more that we apparently haven't seen before. And one thing about Dragon Ball Online is that there were a lot of characters that we haven't actually seen in anything, right? But that was up until we started getting heroes and the Xenoverse series, because remember, both games take from the concept of Dragon Ball Online, right? Again, the Time Patrol, Time Breakers, especially Dragon Ball Heroes, where a lot of those characters actually did make it over to that game. Like, for example, Haru Haru and Shun Shun, right? Those are 2 Time Breakers. They made it to that game. Mira, Toa, they're in that game. Few in that game. Like, there's so many characters. But this can be their opportunity to kind of, I won't say fix, but kind of like rework it a little bit to make it work. Again, a lot of the characters that were on there that were part of the Time Breakers have been moved over to other games, right? So apart from like Few, because obviously I'm assuming he's going to be at the forefront of leading the Time Breakers, they can add those original characters. I'm pretty sure there's going to be some original characters that are in time with, like, you know, the Time Patrol, but also add some to the Time Breakers to give it a fresh experience, right? Because it's actually been a while since we've had a Dragon Ball game that gave us a huge slew of new characters, right? I believe Kakarot only gave us 1 with Banyu, and then obviously the Xenoverse series gave us well, actually no, because again, Mira and Toa, they aren't like new characters in the Dragon Ball universe like from Xenoverse. Again, they originated in Dragon Ball Online. Same with Few. Let's see, Supreme Kai Time originated in Dragon Ball Heroes. So this can be like their opportunity to give us like a whole slew of new characters. Because apart from Kakarot, I think the last time, no, I was gonna say Ultimate Tenkaichi, and even that's not true, because those characters were also in Dragon Ball Heroes. So Heroes was really that game that gave us a slew of new characters. But even so, I would love to see how they can actually tie all that together, because the pieces kind of line up a little bit with like minor tweaks here and there. Again, the character that we saw from the teaser is very clearly a Saiyan. They went Super Saiyan, and that can still tie with the story of Dragon Ball Online, right? Because the races that you're able to utilize in that game they generalize them as humans, right? But you have the human race, which I guess in, you know, light of Xenoverse, it could be just Saiyans and Earthlings. Then you also have the Namekians, and you also have the Majins. I don't believe Frieza race was in that game at all, but with the Majins, that makes a lot more sense too, because in Dragon Ball Online, it's weird. Boo ended up making a wife, and then they started the Majin race. That's how that happened. I don't know how else to explain it, but that's what happened in Dragon Ball Online. Boo made a wife, and then they ended up starting the Majin race. But in Xenoverse, we can actually experience how the Majin race came to be. Boo, well, he got a magazine, and that it goes from there. So that's what started the Majin race in the Xenoverse series. But it's the fact that the race is established now in the Xenoverse series, so they don't really have to go around making that into a plot point in the sequel, if it does take from Dragon Ball Online, right? And again, like I said, Saiyans are a thing in the Xenoverse series, which could also tie with Dragon Ball Online. The Namekians, same thing. They can find a way to incorporate the Frieza race as well. We'll have to see how that works. But apart from that though, the pieces line up. That's what it is. Like, the basis of the characters that we would play as already exist in Xenoverse. The basis behind the story of fighting off against the Time Breakers already exists in Xenoverse. The characters that are part of all that already exist in Xenoverse. For the most part. So they can really push forward to make Xenoverse 3 really tie in with Dragon Ball Online. Or I guess in a sense, it would technically be like a Dragon Ball Online 2, if you will. But Age 1000 is Dragon Ball Online. So the only thing I can think of is, seeing that Hirano-san is, you know, making the game, he's the producer, it makes sense for it to be Xenoverse. Now, again, that's not to say like they're gonna call it Dragon Ball Xenoverse 3. They obviously could if they really want to, or maybe they'll call it something else. Who knows? But I do believe that it's gonna continue that story some way, somehow, and Age 1000 is Dragon Ball Online. So I really want to see how they're going to push that forward, because since Dragon Ball Online didn't even finish, it lasted, I believe, 2 years. Like, I played it well after it ended. I played on a fan server, but like, it only lasted 2 years. They didn't even get to finish the story, not even remotely close. So this will be their best opportunity to fully flesh out that story, to give it the conclusion that it deserves, albeit in a different, you know, game, but still to give it the conclusion it deserves. And I think that'd be really cool. So it could kind of wrap up the Time Patrollers versus the Time Breakers, because with Dragon Ball Online, it involved the Demon Realm as well, which also can work out very, very well with Xenoverse 3, if you will, because seeing that the Demon Realm is now an officially established thing in the Dragon Ball canon, they can also use that to their advantage with Dragon Ball Daima. So let's say that in that timeline, Goma ends up, running supreme and nobody can stop him. Maybe through that, like maybe maybe Fu can like manipulate him, use him to his advantage to get like control over the Demon Realm and have them go after the Time Patrol, right? That could work. That could officially work. Now, obviously they'd have to get Goma in the game, which would be interesting, but they can make that work. It would be sound, right? Because Goma wanted to rule the Demon Realm with an iron fist, right? That could work. And plus, Goma would have a personal vendetta against the people that tried to stop him, right? And those people could be affiliated, well, actually they are affiliated with the Time Patrol. So again, what better way to try to get rid of them if turning them into kids didn't work? Try wiping them out from history, right? So there's so much that they can do in terms of tying in Xenoverse 3 with Dragon Ball Online and also Dragon Ball Daima, because that's established the Demon Realm. But we'll have to see like what they do. But personally speaking, I do think that it is Xenoverse 3, and I think that Xenoverse 3 is going to be merging, if you will, with Dragon Ball Online to finally complete that story, in a sense. It would make a lot of sense. It's what makes sense to me, but we'll ultimately find out all those details at Battle Hour in April. But I do want to know what you guys thought about this in the comment section below, and I do want to know if you guys think that it is Dragon Ball Xenoverse 3, or if it straight up is just Dragon Ball Online 2, or if it's something else entirely. What are your thoughts as to what Dragon Ball Game Project Age 1000 is in the comment section below? With that being said, I'm Ndukauba. Like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.